Cash had a hot second half of the season. He caught fire at that. First blood well in right center for him. There's that drive, deep to right. Get a new ball out, Mr. Umpire. That one is gone. The third Tiger home run. I'll say one thing, there was nothing cheap about that home run. That was high and far.
Stormin' Norman Cash by Maxwell Cates. Norm Cash would have loved. The story drew upon metaphors including baseball, the Old West, and the camaraderie of friends. Its title, City Slick, was evocative of the relationship between the burly cowboy and the legions of brewers, auto manufacturers, and teamsters who became his fans, including one 10-year-old me. The director, Billy Crystal, who also played the protagonist, Mitch Robbins, later filmed a motion picture about the 1961 American League baseball season at Tiger Stadium. I tried out for that movie at Wayne State. I still remember when our whole league was invited, the Detroit MSBL. They were using Tiger Stadium as Yankee Stadium. It was just before it got torn down. In a poignant scene, an elderly cattle driver named Curly, played by Jack Palance, teaches Mitch the meaning of life. Moments later, Mitchie the Kid delivers a calf, who he names Norman. Sadly, Norm Cash never had the opportunity to see City Slickers. It was released in theaters in 1991, 5 years after he drowned in a tragic boat accident. But just who was Norm Cash? He was larger than life. First baseman from Texas, who lived, drank, and played hard, sang country and western in the clubhouse, and could be depended upon in clutch situations. This is his story. My favorite player. Norman Dalton Cash was born November 10, 1934, in Justisburg, Texas, located southeast of Lubbock. Justisburg boasted a population of 25, according to the 1925 population census. Fittingly, its most famous citizen wore 25 as his uniform number for most of his professional baseball career. Cash's most dominant childhood memories were of helping on the family farm. My dad's life was hard work. He had 250 acres of fertile land, and we grew cotton on 200 acres. I drove a tractor from the time I was 10. Sometimes I drove it 10, 12 hours. Working with a hoe on the farm also allowed him to develop his wrists. Ironically, those who knew Cash during his youth remember his athletic abilities, not on the baseball diamond, but on the football gridiron. In 1955, during his senior year at Sul State College in San Angelo, he set the school rushing record with 1,255 yards. Following graduation, Cash was even drafted in the 13th round as a halfback by the Chicago Bears. Instead, he chose baseball, signing with the Chicago White Sox as an outfielder in May 21, 1955. Meanwhile, Cash had married his childhood sweetheart, schoolteacher, Marta Bob Harper, on January 24, 1954. After 2 seasons at Fort Bliss, the left-handed hitter and fielder was promoted to Comiskey Park midway through the 58 season. Cash was soon converted to a first baseman. After some seasoning at Indianapolis, he was recalled by the White Sox in 59, playing backup to Earl Torgeson. Cash batted only .240 but fielded a stellar .993 in 31 games. The White Sox, led by speedy infielders Louis Aparicio and Nellie Fox, raced to the summit of the American League standings, hitting 46 triples and stealing 113 bases in 94 victories. A go-go Sox outdistanced second-place Cleveland by 5 games to capture their first pennant in 40 years. However, the Sox were badly overmatched by the Los Angeles Dodgers, losing the World Series in 6 games. I did not know the White Sox were in the World Series in 59. Much like their 1906 predecessor, The '59 incarnation of the White Sox were indeed hitless wonders. Not even late-season acquisition Ted Kluszewski could save the Sox from their 97 aggregate home runs and anemic .250 batting average. During the offseason, President Bill Veeck acquired veteran Roy Sievers, Gene Freese, and Minnie Minoso to bolster Chicago's offense. However, he was forced to mortgage his future prospects, including Earl Batty, Don Mincher, Johnny Callison, and Norm Cash. Oh, wow, it's amazing what he lost. No match for Kluszewski and Torgerson, Cash was sent to Cleveland with Bubba Phillips and Johnny Romano in a 7-player Minoso deal on December 6, 1959. Although Cash wore a Cleveland cap on his 1960 Topps baseball card, he never played an inning for the Indians. On April 12th, as the tribe headed north from Tucson at the conclusion of spring training, Cash found himself traded yet again. This time he was dispatched to Detroit in exchange for outfielder Steve Demeter. Detroit general manager Rick Farrell was dumbfounded when Frank Lane, his Cleveland counterpart, offered Cash for Demeter, unsure if he meant Cold Cash or Norm Cash. While Demeter's career with the Indians consisted of merely 4 games, Cash became a fixture at first base in Detroit for 15 years. Lane was not through making controversial trades with the Tigers. 5 days later, he sent Rocky Colavito to Michigan for Harvey Keene, and later in 1960, the 2 clubs swapped managers, Joe Gordon for Jimmy Dykes. Cash's teammates took an immediate liking to him. A comedian both on and off the field, in the clubhouse, he once tried to call time after being picked off first base. In another instance, Cash was stranded on second base during a thunderstorm. Once play resumed, however, he returned to third base. The umpire was baffled. "What are you doing over there?" "I stole third," he answered. "When did that happen?" "During the rain." On several occasions, he gave a muddy infield ball to the pitcher instead of the game ball, so hitters could not see it as well, L. Kaline remembers. Don Shawal struck the police tow truck. He was equally skilled at first base, fielding a sterling .993, as he caught dozens of long foul balls before they could fly into the stands. With Kaline's .324 batting average and Colavito's .290 complementing Cash in the lineup, the Tigers, led by Frank Larry and his 23 victories, challenged the Yankees for the American League pennant. The Bengals came within a game and a half of the Bronx Bombers on September 1st, before retracting to finish 8 behind the standings with 101 victories. Rest in peace, Al. Whenever you mention Norm Cash, I just smile. He was just a fun guy to be around and a great teammate. He always came ready to play. People don't know this, but he often played injured. Like the time he had a broken finger. Sonny Elliott, Detroit's ageless, wacky weatherman, describes Cash as just old-fashioned likable, comparing his physical form to a Cupid doll from the State Fair. Whenever he came to bat, I would yell, "Hey, Cupid doll!" He'd turn around and laugh. It was just another Southerner and recent transplant to Detroit who presented Cash with his nickname. I was in Baltimore for 6 years. There was a fellow there named Norman Almany, remembers Ernie Harwell. Everybody called him Stormin Norman. I didn't think he liked it at first, but after a while, he started treasuring it. After a respectable 1960 season in which he batted .286, with 18 home runs, Cash captured the baseball world by storm in 1961. Although playing in the shadow of Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, Cash posted one of the most outstanding offensive single-season records in American League history. Stormin Norman led the junior circuit with 193 hits and hit .361 batting average. Number 25 also established personal marks of 41 home runs, 132 RBIs, 8 triples. Even more astounding, he hit .388 on the road. Facing Washington's Joe McLean on June 11th, Cash became the first Detroit player to clear the Tiger Stadium roof, hitting a home run that landed on Trumbull Avenue. Another against Boston's Don Shaw.
Lazard looks in to get his sign. Here's the windup, the pitch. There's a long drive to deep right. It's out of here. A home run by Norman Cash. And the Tigers have tied the game at 1-1 here in the sixth inning.
Was Norm Cash destined to become a one-year wonder? Even at the time, he knew his 61 season was a freak, saying that everything he hit seemed to drop in, even when he didn't make good contact. After Frank Leary injured his leg on opening day and Al Kaline broke his shoulder during a nationally televised game in May, it became clear the Tigers would not again challenge the Yankees in 1962. The season was equally disappointing for Cash, who batted only .243 for the season. The 118 points shaved from his average remains a record of futility among batting champs. Cash ultimately found his swing, batting .342 during an autumn exhibition trip to Japan. But by that point, the regular season was long over. Still, the 1962 season was far from the write-off for the affable Texan. Cash hit 39 homers, including 3 more roof shots, as the league runner-up to Herman Killebrew's 48. His .993 fielding percentage was identical to his 1961 average. Cash never again cracked the .300 plateau. Years later, when Mickey Lilich asked why, he replied that Jim Campbell pays me to hit home runs. Indeed, Cash's 373 home runs for the Tigers remains second only to Al Kaline's 399. Of course, this was written pre-Mickey. He's in third now, among aggregate team records.
However, it soon became evident that other factors besides the maturation of expansion pitching compromised Stormin Norman's batting average. Cheating in baseball was as much an issue in 1961 as it remains today. And Sonny Elliott remembers why Norm Cash called that season a year of the quick bat. Nah, I wouldn't cheat. We used to sit in the old Bendel AC, said Sonny Elliott, referring to the popular watering hole adjacent to Tiger Stadium. We just ripped a lot of them. Did you put a cork in that bat? If not cork, was it lead or whatever it was? We just ripped him. He struck out frequently, and fans expecting another batting title consistently booed Cash for the balance of his career. Even his wife joined the chorus on occasion. Stormin Norman knew that inherently they were as good-natured as he was.
After all, when Mayo Smith removed Cash from the lineup during a slump, the manager was also booed. He was not bothered by the sounds of tens of thousands of boos. When one or two guys get on your back, they drive you nuts. For their appreciation of his congeniality and humor, the Tiger fan club crowned Cash King Tiger in 1969. George Cantor described Cash as the most popular man on the team, who knew all the best watering holes throughout the American League. Although Cash stifled the cork in 1962, he soon found himself fighting a much larger battle in alcoholism. Denny McLean described his roommate as a modern medical miracle who abused his body so mercilessly that he should have turned it over to the Mayo Clinic. Stormin Norman violated every curfew rule in the book, but he somehow arrived at the ballpark every day, not only eager to play, madder than hell if he didn't. Granted, Cash rarely showed up on time. He could not make 9 o'clock a.m. workouts because he threw up until 10 o'clock. McLean credited hustle and determination as the secret to Cash's big league longevity, although the bespectacled right-hander did admit that he was often bewildered how he managed to remain upright when he took the field. I always felt better about everything when I looked over and saw Stormin Norman on first base. Players were rarely unanimously accepted by their peers, but Cash proved an exception. As pitcher, Jerry Cassell once conveyed, on a team with so many friends, there was no one nicer than Norm Cash. Cash was nothing if not consistent for the balance of the 1960s. He was the only American League hitter to slug 20 or better home runs each year from 1961 to 1969. In 1964, he set a team record among Detroit first basemen by fielding an outstanding .997. On July 9, 1965, Stormin Norman hit an inside-the-park home run against the A's at Municipal Stadium in Kansas City. The blast must have ignited Cash's non-corked bat, as he decimated American League pitchers with 23 home runs and 58 RBIs in 78 games after the All-Star break. His second-half exploits earned him the Comeback Player of the Year honors, and in 1966 he was invited to the All-Star game. Cash once again led junior circuit first baseman in fielding with .997 percentage. Meanwhile, the Cash family was expecting as Norm and Myrta welcomed son Jay Carl on April 28, 1963, and daughter Julie Lee on December 28, 1964. Stormin Norman proved to be the exception on the 1968 Tigers as he was fighting an early season slump. On July 27, the 6-foot Cash was barely hitting his weight, batting .195 on a team cruising to his first American League pennant in 23 years. In dramatic fashion, he hit a torrid .333 in his last 54 games to finish the season at .263, including his 12 home runs and 33 RBIs. In August and September, there was a 3-run blast against Oakland on September 14th. The winning pitcher of the 5-4 victory was Denny McLain, his 30th of the season. Cash led the Tiger batsmen in the World Series, hitting .385 against the Cardinals pitching, setting a dubious October record as Bob Gibson's 16th strikeout in Game 1. He redeemed himself the following afternoon, homering off Nelson Browse in an 8-1 complete game victory for Mickey Lolich. Facing elimination in Game 6, Cash enjoyed another productive day at the plate, counting for 2 of the 13 Detroit runs, tying the series at 3 games. This set the stage for a historic Game 7. The Tigers were unfazed at the prospect of facing a pitcher who specialized in winning Game 7s, Bob Gibson. In the clubhouse after practice, manager Mel Smith encouraged his players that Gibson can be beat. He's not Superman. To this, Cash chimed, "Oh yeah? Just a little while ago, I saw him changing in a phone booth." Tiger hitters proved to be kryptonite. With 2 outs and no score in the 7th inning, Cash ignited a Detroit rally with a single off Gibson, and later put the Tigers ahead as the first runner to score on Jim Northrup's triple. The final score was 4-1, and the Tigers were world champions. How well I remember it. I was in 5th grade, and my teacher, Mrs. Emmerich, bought this little 13-inch black and white TV, and we got to watch the game in school. It was pretty special. Never forget it. After being relegated to pinch hitting in 1970, Cash enjoyed a Renaissance season, playing in the Renaissance City in 1971. So torrid was his first half that spectators across Major League ballparks voted him to start the All-Star game on July 13th, played in Detroit. It drew 53,000-plus spectators. American League manager Earl Weaver, however, took exception to Cash's assignment, as he was not the reigning MVP playing for the defending world champions. Boog Powell, Weaver's first baseman in Baltimore, could claim both. Accordingly, Weaver scrapped Cash from the lineup. I think it's scratched. Cash from the lineup and replaced him with Powell. The roster move was not kindly received by the Detroit faithful. After public address announcer Joe Gentile announced the National League All-Stars, he began to present the American League, starting with Weaver. Again, a cloud of boos reigned over Tiger Stadium. Although Rod Carew was the next to be announced, the Twins' second baseman did not take his place when called. Carew was apprehended by Cash and Bobby Mercer to prevent him from leaving the dugout, thereby prolonging the catcalls. Only after a prolonged interval did Carew emerge, breaking up the hecklers. When the dust cleared on the 1971 season, the Tigers had won 91 games, but finished 10 games behind Earl Weaver and the Orioles. Stormin Norman clubbed 32 round-trippers, one shy of Bill Melton's league lead, while driving in 91 runs, batting a respectable .283. His offensive record was enough to win his second American League Comeback Player of the Year award. It would have surprised nobody to hear Cash proclaim, after accepting the honor here, that he hoped that he would win the award again next year. Cash was, however, named to the All-Star team once again in 1972, his 4th and final trip to the Midsummer Classic. His offensive output may have retracted, but the Tigers vaulted ahead in the standings to win their first American League East title. Cash saved his most famous stunt for the twilight of his career. It occurred on July 15, 1973, as the Tigers entertained the visiting California Angels. Not one Detroit batsman had hit safely off starter Nolan Ryan. With 2 away in the bottom of the 9th, the Ryan Express had already fanned 16 as his Angels led 6-0. Potentially the final batter of the game, Norm Cash strode to the plate, substituting a table leg for a bat. Home plate umpire Ron Luciano forbade Cash's creative use of equipment. Cash protested. "But Ron, I've got as much chance with this as I do with a bat." As Jim Northrup remembered from the third base dugout, Cash reluctantly retrieved the bat and struck out on 3 pitches against his fellow Texan. The no-hitter was Ryan's second in as many months. As Cash returned to the dugout, he turned to Luciano and expressed, "See, I told you." The 1974 season was a transitional one for Detroit and their personnel. For only the second time in franchise history, Detroit finished the season in last place. Stormin Norman no longer held the monopoly when youthful infielder Ron Cash joined the Tigers in spring training. Equipment manager John Hand wanted to change the name on Norm's uniform. The first baseman refused in disgust. "If the people can't tell the difference between me and another guy, something's the matter." He became even more incensed when he received a telephone call from general manager on August 7th. Batting only .228 with 12 home runs and 12 RBIs, Cash was released. "I thought at least they'd let me finish out the year. Campbell just called and said I didn't have to show up to the ballpark." That's pretty shitty. I went to see him on Norm Cash Day. They're probably going to be announcing it soon in this article, I would imagine. Let's see. Let's keep going. Norm Cash was a player who knew his baseball career would not last forever. As a player, his off-season occupations included banking, ranching, and auctioning hogs. In the early 1970s, Cash hosted a local variety show in Detroit called The Norm Cash Show. I never got to see that. I was a junior in high school about that. I was pretty busy. In 1976, he teamed up with former October archival Bob Gibson as broadcasters for ABC Monday Night Baseball. Although Cash continued to display his brand of humor, it was not appreciated by all. On-air remarks, such as equating entertainment in Baltimore with going down to the street and watching hubcaps rust, earned Cash his dismissal from the network. In 1978, he made his film debut with a cameo appearance in 1 in a Million, the Ron LaFleur story. Saw the movie, ABC Movie of the Week or something like that. In the scene filmed at Lakeland, Cash was standing with Kaline, Freehand, and Northrup to watch LaFleur in the first spring training after accepting his release from Jackson State Prison. When the others marveled at his speed, Cash chimed in with, "Can't be too fast, the cops caught him." Now divorced from murder, Cash married his second wife Dorothy on May 22, 1973. They moved upstate from Detroit, first to Union Lakes, where Cash worked as a sales representative for an automobile machinery manufacturer. When asked, Cash remarked, "It's good money, but to tell you the truth, I'm looking for something else to do." Sadly, the good times were short-lived, as Detroit automakers proved to be no competition for Japanese imports. Yeah, that was when the crap hit the fan in the 80s. Cash's financial windfall proved to be short-term. His health began to deteriorate, suffering a massive stroke in 1979. As Ernie Harwell remembers, that drinking, Cash was out of commission for quite a while. Fortunately, by 81, he was healthy enough to broadcast the Tigers game for the on-TV cable network. I remember that. He and Hank Aguirre provided color commentary alongside Larry Adderley's play-by-play. Larry Adderley, now it was Larry Oster, used to be with George. By 1983, partial paralysis of his face made him slur his words, and he could no longer continue. In 1986, Cash returned to Tiger Stadium to participate in the Equitable Old Timers game. I was there with my mom. Fans were shocked to see the first baseman a shadow of his physical self. He could no longer field routine infield balls, as a throw from third base hit him in the head before bouncing away. Cash handled the situation with humor, but privately he was embarrassed by the incident. What nobody realized at the time is that the appearance would be his last at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. Scott McKinstry remembers Sunday evening of the Columbus Day weekend being a gray, misty one. "I was standing at the lighthouse on Lake Michigan, looking out over the water where the boats head out from Charlevoix to Beaver Island. The weather forecast echoed the somber mood to be shared by Tiger fans in unison. Man, it must have really just ate him to death not being able to play ball. I can only imagine." Earlier in the day, Cash left his condominium to meet Dorothy and a friend for dinner at the Shamrock Bar in Beaver Island. Those present could affirm that Cash had been drinking. After dinner, he returned to the dock to check on his boat. Unable to navigate the slippery pier in cowboy boots, he fell into the water and could not pull himself out. The next morning, he was found floating in 15 feet of water in St. James Bay. Norman Dalton Cash was pronounced dead on October 12, 1986. He was 51 years young. Tragedy would hit the Cash family a second time, and in 1987 when Norm's son Jay committed suicide. Oh, damn. I wonder why. Like Buddy Holly before him, the Texas legend of Norm Cash lives on. Ernie Harwell recalls receiving an autographed photo from Cash, inscribed with his trademark humor, to the second best broadcaster in the big league. The other 25 tied for first place. Gary Peters, who broke in with the White Sox, riding, fencing, water skiing, concomitantly with Cash, remembers his diverse collection of hobbies, which included horseback riding, fencing, water skiing, dancing, playing the ukulele. Whitey Herzog, Cash's roommate in 1963, once claimed that there was nothing Norm Cash couldn't do, describing Cash as his roommate. However, it might have been exaggeration. Herzog recalls the experience as just like having your own room. On April 23, 2005, the Sandlot in Post, Texas, where Stormin Norman played Little League, was rededicated in the memory of Garza County's most famous athlete as Norm Cash Field. Perhaps the most vocal outward posthumous tribute to Norm Cash in the final hours of the ballpark, whose first base he called home. From the Eisenhower to the Nixon administration, a sellout crowd of 43,556 jammed Tiger Stadium on September 27, 1999, for the final game against the Kansas City Royals. Several Tigers switched uniform numbers to pay homage to the players who passed before them. Paying tribute to Ty Cobb, Gabe Kapler did not wear any number at all. Rookie Rob Fick, switching his number from 18 to 25 to honor Norm Cash. Only Fick went one step further. The Tigers enjoyed a comfortable 4-2 eighth-inning lead when Fick crushed a Jeff Montgomery fastball for a grand slam home run. In true Norm Cash fashion, the ball nearly went over the right field roof. Tom Stanton reports in the final season, a diary in which points Tiger Stadium as a metaphor for the good between fathers and sons, that Fick looked up in the sky and thought of my dad, who passed away the year before. I know he had something to do with all this. So did Norm Cash. Didn't say anything about his Norm Cash Day. I'm surprised, because I was there. It was in August 1974. I have the picture. They didn't mention it. Still interesting. Thank you for watching.
Lazard looks in to get his sign. Here's the windup, the pitch. There's a long drive to deep right. It's out of here. A home run by Norman Cash. And the Tigers have tied the game at 1-1 here in